Hello, I'm Kristen Cain from Kind Body. I'm one of the REI doctors here, and I would like you to meet Roberto Fontanez, and he is our director of lab operations. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And handles all of our andrology labs, male sperm, and we've been talking for a while about what men who are married to other men have to go through to have a child. We thought it would be fun to chat about these issues from a dad perspective.
So my name is Roberto Fontanez, and my history has been one of finding where kindness and bravery can make anything happen. And when I was in the military, I got to see, what family meant to people when they were willing to risk everything to protect them. And when I pursued my career through science, I'm a clinical laboratory scientist by trade. I saw healthcare being a place where you can take care of families, families from old and young. And I gravitated towards fertility because I am actually an adopted son.
Wow.
My father is, a 6 foot tall, grumpy old Italian man, and I wouldn't have anyone else because I saw what families would go through just to get started, and he adopted me late in life. So when
And was he a single dad? Were you raised by a single dad who adopted
my single father, and
wow.
Yeah, he showed me what can happen when your life switches in its purpose. He dedicated himself to his career and to his family, his extended family, but never stopped to build his own until me.
So that's one way two dads can have a family, obviously, is adoption. But there's issues with adoption, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me what some of the issues are that you've seen and when you've looked into it?
Well, adoption, in vitro fertilization, even IUI with a friend, they're all different paths to start a family, and they all come with different issues. In adoption, you have kids that are less desirable, older kids that don't have families. You have differing legal situations, even in our country where we are open-minded and progressive. There are still states where it's difficult for a queer family to adopt, and there are laws in other countries that prevent queer families from adopting from there as well. International adoptions are really difficult to navigate, and at Kind Body, our message is accessibility to care, and a big part of that is the legal and financial hurdles that patients face just for such a simple thing.
Right. And I don't think I would say kids that are less desirable, but certainly kids that might have different challenges that you might not be prepared to take on.
True.
And,
True.
It takes a special person with a special set of circumstances sometimes to take on kids who have medical problems or social problems or who are older, and it's a different situation.
Yeah, my dad was very few and brave, and I love him for it. I was adopted actually at 17 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's difficult, I think, to expand on what are you willing to do for this journey, and how far can you go is about how much support you can get. And I think the message that my life has taught me is that if you are willing to go above and beyond, you can make anything happen.
I think that's true. Now, you mentioned another option, which is IUI with a friend. This is something that people sometimes do. There's a lot of movies made about that. and they touch, lightly on some of the things that can come up. But IUI with a friend is one of those things that seems maybe it's the least expensive, easiest way to go on the surface. But what are some of the What are some of the challenges when you do that? And for people listening, IUI means insemination, intrauterine insemination, where sperm is placed up inside a woman's uterus, and then she has the baby for the couple and gives them the baby.
Right. And that last part is kind of one of the really big, important things. We can all break down the simple process of how to go through an intrauterine insemination and the medications involved, which is a barrier. I mean, it's not an easy process to go through, but the parentage is a question and it's difficult because, you know, life circumstances can change. Families don't always follow the same makeup or the same idea that you thought when you started. And as that changes, you can run into barriers where someone doesn't want to give up their child or someone doesn't want to be a father anymore.
Right.
And this is difficult because you cannot force someone through this. And going through, especially with someone that you care about, it's almost kind of harder because there is so much connection, and that if something changed in you, you almost feel obliged.
Right. And it is legally very risky
Mhm.
because the mother could decide to keep the child. She could request child support. Um, the dad could or dads could have trouble getting visitation with the child, much less full custody, which is what you want. Things like you said, things can change. People
And
can
even in
change.
directed donors, it's very uh, legally difficult to navigate because when, like, if I was to take my, best friend of 25 years, we knew each other since, elementary school and through life, and we can start this process. But when I am her directed donor, I am giving up custody of my sperm.
Yes.
And that's no longer mine. And we have to trust that what we wanted initially stays the same, and that maybe, I can lose a child and there'd be no recourse, unless you get a
Exactly.
bunch of lawyers
So,
involved.
so it's not as simple as it seems. It sounds very cheap, but then on the other hand, too, this mother, she's going to need medical insurance. Who pays for that? Who
Right?
pays for her complications of her delivery if something goes wrong? Who pays for her being out of work for maternity leave? Those are all things that are
You're not married, so
questions
you
that
can't
have to
cover it under
be.
your own insurance most of the
Yeah,
times. Like if it's a queer couple that's getting their friend involved, it, you can't apply for benefits. It's very,
right.
very difficult.
It is. And then there's the other option we talked about, which is IVF. So with IVF, what happens is you get an egg donor and you use the intended dad's sperm and you combine them to make a fertilized egg and embryo. And then the embryo is placed into a gestational carrier. So the donor is a person who has gone through IVF to provide eggs. She's usually, I guess, a disinterested party. She might be paid for it, or she might be a friend who's willing to give up eggs, and these things have to be worked out. The gestational carrier is also somebody who might be paid, might be somebody that you haven't met before, and you develop a relationship with her during the course of her pregnancy. And these things, there's protocols for these things. There's ways of trying to protect all the parties involved. And until recently, gay men couldn't do this because
No,
and some states you still might not be able to, but the FDA had problems saying, when we were screening men to donate sperm, that if they had had sex with another man within the past 6 months,
they could not
they
be
were
cleared.
automatically disqualified. Well, that's not going to
Well,
work.
the
So,
story of surrogacy is, it's something that I learned because one, I think accessibility to care is not just the barriers of getting there, but one of the biggest barriers is knowledge. Not many people are legal scholars of the tissue banking world.
right.
And when I first learned about the legal quandaries of surrogacy, it blew my mind and it broke my heart at the same time, because you're right. There are historic laws about, men who have sex with men not being able to donate any kind of tissue. There
Right,
were men who had sex with men were turned away from giving blood at mass shootings. And it's still the case in a lot of places now that if you had sex, you can donate blood, but only if you haven't had sex with another man in the last year.
right,
And that's one big barrier. And the other barrier, besides discrimination, is good intentions. Surrogacy is a beautiful arrangement where you can have it all cleared, lay it out. And you're right, it's just typically a disinterested party where, they've done their part, they've been compensated in some sort of way. But there were concerns, early concerns in the 80s and 90s, and justifiable, about human trafficking. There were
right, exactly.
it's a heartbreaking story when you hear about women who were manipulated and coerced into donating eggs, or coerced into being a surrogate. So, and then you don't know, if I was to do it even right now, after working in fertility for years, I still wouldn't know how to best vet a company that's organizing this. They can have
Right.
beautiful web pages, but terrible practices, and I wouldn't know.
Right. And so the best way to do that is that everybody meets with a therapist. So normally with what we call third party reproduction, where you're involving a third party in your family building, an egg donor or a gestational carrier or a sperm donor, that those people meet with the therapist and make sure that the therapist's job is to make sure that they are not being coerced, that they won't regret doing this for people, that they will be able to separate themselves from any child that ensues from this practice.
Right.
And good legal contracts are really important too, that spell out, okay, who owes what to who? What are you going to do? Who's going to pay for maternity clothes? What happens with maternity leave? What rights do people have? What rights don't they have? Are they going to get a birthday card every month? Will the child meet the surrogate? Does the child want to meet the egg donor? Do you want the child to meet the egg
Yeah.
donor? They can swab their cheek and find all their little siblings and
Yeah, there are
they can do all kinds of crazy things.
I mean, luckily, I never had to guess if I was adopted, but there are people who care about that, and even consistency. So, um, my ideal family, I've have a wonderful partner, and it would be great if we can have one donor so that our children can be siblings. And that could be really cool if, I'm the father of one embryo and he's the father of another, and we could do dual surrogacy. And like, what I love about the story of a queer family is that there are so many options, that
So many
it,
ideas.
so many ideas. Like, I've had friends who were transitioning in their gender, and he preserved his eggs right before his gender reassignment and was able to still be a father, which is just, I get goosebumps at just the idea of helping those families in my career, and also just seeing them in my community. And yeah, I've seen moms that preserve their sperm prior to their reassignment, or even before starting hormone therapy, early in their transitioning process, so that they had the best quality sperm going into the family building
Right,
stages.
right.
And that's the kind of stuff that makes IVF medicine and fertility medicine amazing, is that what I thought going in initially of, oh, well, you need to get your best friend pregnant, with a turkey
And fight about
baster.
it later.
You got to do it with the bubble tea straw. And,
Yeah, yeah.
and there are these amazing, amazing options where, we could have a donor donate, 2 eggs to us. We can inseminate one, and then, I could have a sibling carry one egg and another sibling carry another. And it's, it's still really it's a story of hope and progress,
Yeah,
where it may be difficult, but aren't the best things in life worth putting a little hard work
of
into?
course, of course. And I think, there's a lot here to think about. A lot of options are available. Um, the best plan is, before you decide to do anything, just sit down and chat with somebody, in this field, who can kind of help you work through what your options are, what options are good for you, which ones may not be as good. And it can be a reproductive endocrinologist like me. It can be a gynecologist who works extensively with fertility, or a urologist who works extensively with fertility preservation, or works with transitioning men and women. Or it could be a therapist, a reproductive therapist, or even a family law attorney who knows a lot about these issues can be a great resource to get some ideas of, what's appropriate for you and
That's
what's
kind
not,
of
to
why
help narrow it down.
that's why I came to Kindbody. Is Kindbody is growing and is becoming something, and that the fact that early on in our process, they knew to bring voices that would speak to different stories. And we're creating a space where our entire country will have access to people who know how to build a queer family, that know how to help people who are in transitioning, people whose gender are changing, and all of that, because we started with that first impetus of we are kind. And
Right.
that kindness is what makes medicine work. That's where we can have an honest conversation. That's where you can hear the truth of what your path can look like. And we'll do it with optimism.
One last thing I would really like to talk about before we sign off is cost, because it's really unfair, but all the cost for a gay male couple to have a baby is significantly higher than anybody else. Now, some people could say, yeah, but they don't have to be the pregnant one. And,
Yeah.
there's truth to that. But it really, for cost wise, it's ridiculous, because you always need a woman to carry the baby. And if you're not lucky enough to have a sister or a cousin or a friend who will serve as your surrogate and be able to do this for you, even if you don't have to pay her, you still have maternity costs, and
Yeah.
that really can add up.
I think it boils down to trust. And I may have had friends, but the friends that we decided would be the mother of my child in high school is she's struggling with PCOS now. And
Right.
that changed my family plan. And while I trust her 100% to be, the surrogate mother of my dreams, I would have to trust someone else with guiding me to what my new version will look like for my family. And I think that's what Kindbody's building, is that we will have the network of providers and nurses and therapists and scientists that all want to help you and will earn your trust to build that family.
Right.
It's going to be, there are still costs, there are barriers that make it difficult, but there are places that make it less difficult.
And there's this great website too, and I don't, maybe you know how to put it in, maybe we can put it in a comment or something, but there's this great website called Men Having Babies, and they have so many resources. So they have a library list, they have articles you can
It is
read.
studying. You got to know what you're going into.
Right. And they do fundraising, and they try to work with clinics to get clinics to, do scholarships and donations and things like that. And they have a lot of events as well. So that can also be a great
Men
resource.
having babies. I mean, we create families, and I think whatever that family looks like, there's a path, and we can find it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Roberto. I'm going to stop recording now, but I think this went great, and you've given everybody a lot to think about. A lot of cool things are available to have a baby. The bottom line, I'd say, is it is possible. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, ma'am.
Legislation's getting better all the time, so good enough.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Cain.
Thank you. See ya.
See ya.